Hi, welcome back to HOA Hell. I'm your host, Michael Kushner. With me today, as usual, is Senior Associate at MBK Chapman, Sam Kill. Sam?
Hello, Mike. Great to be back with you.
Good. Well, this is part two of a two-part episode on the, I wouldn't call it an epidemic, but it certainly happens enough to where we see it frequently, and that's massive embezzlement by HOA insiders, directors, managers, and their cohorts. And in part one, we talked about the nature of the problem in general, and we talked about two very publicized situations. One in Santa Monica at the Ocean Towers, right? And then the other one was in Chula Vista, and one of them was perpetrated by crooked board members and insiders, and the other one was perpetrated by a crooked manager. And after we talked about those, generally we went and talked about the five different most common ways we see embezzlement perpetrated on a day-to-day basis. Right. And we even talked about several. We gave examples of all five of those from cases that are in our office or were in our office at one point.
Surprisingly common.
Yeah, surprisingly common. Mm-hmm. And today, as promised, we're going to start from, okay, what can we as homeowners look for? What red flags can we look for that would help us determine whether or not there might be something very wrong with our HOA? In other words, I'm going to give you some things to look out for, and I'll give you some examples of how it would manifest in real life. And then if you see one or more of these situations occur in your HOA, I would call those red flags. And then based on your own judgment, you'll make a decision for yourself whether or not it merits further investigation. But now, none of these by themselves are necessarily mean something is wrong, but these are going to be some whistles, and important ones. And I'm going to give you several of these, and these are the ones I sat back and thought to myself, if I, knowing what I know about this area of the law, wanted to look into my HOA, what would I look for? And I wrote them down, and that's how I came up with these. Okay? So, how do you know, Sam, if something shady is going on in your HOA? So, here's what to look for. Okay? And every one of these, again, are from cases that we have in our office or had in our office, and we are speaking with firsthand knowledge. Okay, number one, and by the way, in no particular order. Okay? Here's something you can look for. Number one, sudden, unexplained special assessments, okay? But especially ones where what's being claimed as the basis for the special assessment doesn't match what the last reserve study indicated, okay? Or special assessments that seem to pop up every couple of years or so, okay? More kind of regular. Let me give you an example why the second one is something we see, but it doesn't always mean embezzlement, but it does provide a red flag for something else, and I don't want to let it pass without mentioning it to you. So I'm gonna do this one first, okay? This one, again, not necessarily embezzlement red flag, but it's absolutely a red flag for failure to maintain. And that is, you have an HOA who, instead of spending money year after year as they're supposed to maintain HOA common area assets, you have an HOA that allows things just to go bad. And when it's time to replace, they do a special assessment because they don't have the money in the budget or in reserves to handle it. And so every so often, special assessment, replace the whatevers. And it would last so much longer if they just maintained them. You could double, triple, quadruple the life of those things. So that is a red flag. More regular special assessments that seem to occur around the same amount per household, around the same amount of time, but might not be an embezzlement red flag, but it could be. But much more common than that is the unexplained special assessments that don't match what the reserve study's saying. So let me give you an example, unless you want to. Do you have one off the top of your head?
Well, I have actual cases, but also many consultations that I've done.
Give me one. Let's do one with let's do a client.
Okay. In this case, common area component required waterproofing. and
Right.
they attempted to do a special assessment. I believe it was either $30,000 or $40,000.
I thought it was,
total, but basically spread among the homeowners.
okay, yeah.
And none of that was indicated or reflected in the reserve study. So the reserve study did not indicate any need for that at all.
Right.
So it's either what you alluded to, their failure to maintain.
No, I don't think it was that. I think it was, turned out it was embezzlement.
Right. But basically in this case, they went ahead and they circulated this special assessment on the homeowners. And we are currently in a posture. I'm trying to navigate it carefully so I don't divulge too many details.
I'll do it then.
Basically.
I'll do it because I don't have as many details as you do because it's not my case, it's yours, so I'll do it. Yeah. The issue here is we've got a situation where a homeowner, gets this notice of special assessment, and I think it's I think the total for each home might have just been a couple $1,000, but I think the total was more than 30. But I think the aggregate was. I could be remembering it incorrectly, but anyways. We have this homeowner who pulled the last reserve study and looked at it closely and didn't see anything indicated in there that this was something that was running up against. Yeah. In fact, this element had plenty of time left on its life, and it looked like the HOA was reserving for that line item, was reserving properly. So the money should have already been in reserves. So it shouldn't have had to been spent. That's the issue there. That's a red flag. Does it always mean something? No, but it's a common red flag. You want to compare. If it doesn't match, it doesn't match. Okay? Next one. Refusals to provide financial records under following a legitimate Civil Code Section 5200 demand. Very common. Okay? So, you have a right. I've done an entire podcast on this. I did a short on this. You can find both of them on YouTube at podcast. HOA Hell Podcast Official. 5200 is a powerful tool for homeowners to use to get documents. You're entitled to these documents, especially financials. Any HOA that balks at giving you a copy of all of the bank records, canceled checks, bank statements for every account that it's in the HOA's name, a general operating account, a spending account, a reserve account, or accounts, doesn't matter. You're entitled to all of it. Any HOA that balks at that is a massive red flag. They should have no issues. They should go, you want bank records? How far back do you want? If the bank has them, by all means, we'll give you anything you want. We have nothing to hide. That's what's supposed to happen. There should be no worries about it. Go to your heart's content, review the bank records. So you want canceled checks? There you go. You want income and expense statements? Here you go, prepared by our accountant. When they don't do that, when they're like, well, they're unavailable, or we're in the process of having our accountant review the request, and then that person will determine what you need. No, that is a red flag by itself. I think that's one of the more important ones. It is almost certainly a sign of nefarious conduct, because only if you have something to hide are you scared to hand over a document. Otherwise, be my guest. It's not like your personal account where you spend money on things that you don't want people to know what you buy. You don't want them to know what movies you rent or what kind of food you eat or what kind of, what your hobbies are, let's say. These aren't personal expenditures. These are business expenditures. They're all supposed to be very business-oriented, dry. Here's our budget for maintenance supplies. Here's our budget for construction and landscaping. And here's our budget for, who cares, right? When they play games, that is a huge red flag right off the bat, okay? Third one, recurring vendor names with vague labels like maintenance consultant, okay? Or facilities improvement coordinator. Both of those appear in cases that we currently have. Let me tell you something. Whenever you see the word consultant next to anything and it relates to your HOA, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's probably completely BS. There is no reason other than to kick back money to an insider where you should ever be hiring a consultant if you're an HOA. A lawyer? Yes. An accountant? Yes. A contractor? Yes. They aren't consultants. They're professionals. They're licensed. Okay? Consultants, what is a consultant? Okay? Especially when it's maintenance consultant. So wait a minute. I'm going to hire some person that's some sort of expert in maintenance to tell me what kind of maintenance people I need to hire. I mean, it's stupid. Okay, it really is. All right. Or facilities coordinator or facilities management consultant or any of the terms like that. Take your pick. Bogus. Okay. We had a client, do you remember this? Who asked in the 5200 demand for a copy of the check registers, among other things. But check registers are one of the things you look at. And in that demand, and I'm going to read from that demand. I'm not going to quote it. I want to make sure I get it right. They asked for, they wanted to see the outspending or the whatever was spent for somebody that was called, there was a company, and I'm going to change the name of the company because I don't want to use it now. So I'm going to call it, I'm making this up. This is fake. Acme Property Solutions. Okay. But the title was Facility Improvement Consultant. Okay. But I'm making the name up because it's currently in litigation and I don't want to say anything. I'm not going to give the real name. So call it Acme, just like from the Roadrunner cartoon. Okay. So Acme Property Solutions. When you looked at the check register, there was regular payments, like every month, going out $4,000 a month on the ledger, going out to this Acme Property Solutions, and he had no idea. Our client had no idea what. Unclear. Yeah. Okay, $4,000, and this was a big HOA, over 500 units. Okay, in South Orange County. He had no idea what that was, and so we asked, and of course, the board couldn't really give him a good answer. $4,000 a month for this facilities coordinator that worked for this company called fake Acme Property Solutions. Mm-hmm. What is that money for? They wouldn't give him a straight answer. That is a red flag. If they will not give you a straight answer to a direct question. I noticed that we pay $4,000 a month to Acme Property Solutions. Can you guys just tell me what Acme Property Solutions is? Of course, they Googled it. So it's a real company, not Acme, that's fake, but yeah, right. They Googled it, it exists, but what are they doing for our HOA and what are they doing for $4,000 a month? Now, this hadn't been going on for a long time, it was just a few months, but it was. But
the purport of the services were unclear, undisclosed, and the board was either unwilling or unable to provide detail.
The board didn't say, we don't know. That would have been bad, okay? Board didn't say that. The board didn't say, well, that's personal, we're not allowed to share that because that would be wrong. The board just punted and avoided the question, would not answer it, which is even worse and very suspicious. Okay? They're not even coming up creatively with a lie. They're just punting. That is a massive red flag. Okay? Another example of a red flag that you would see is a board refusing to answer, right? Basic, straightforward questions. So it's very tied to this other one, but this other one was based on recurring charges that nobody can answer about. Now let's go to the meat of that is anything that they don't give you a straight answer to. That's a red flag too. Anything. Okay. So we spent $80,000 last year on landscaping, but our stuff looks like crap. Yeah. So where's the money going?
We're not going to get into any line item discussion.
Right. Yeah. And that's what they say. We are not, our contract is with the landscaping company. We are very careful about how we spend your money. This was the line that they fed our client, by the way. And we're happy to answer generalized questions, but we're not going to get into what were the words they used?
Discussing line item costs.
Line item costs. Yeah. We're not going to go through the budget and answer questions about line item costs because then we'd be doing it all day. Well, that's just BS. First of all, he's the only one that ever asked that question. So they're not going to do it all day. It's not like if I give it to you, I have to give it to everybody. No, because most people don't ask. So that's a lie. That is a red flag. They won't answer a very simple. Here's all they have to say. Our contract, they come 3 days a week. We cover X amount of acres and we pay them X amount a month. And then the other one was because the fire department ordered us to remove in stages, remove all the trees above a certain line on our slope because of create that fire line that's required under California law. And the fire marshal told us we had to do it, so we had to spend another $20,000 to do it. It takes 20 seconds to answer that? That's all it took. How do I know? Because I asked my HOA once, several years ago. I just said, why did we spend 40 grand on this? And they said, yeah, because one of our directors brought something up to the fire marshal, and the fire marshal came in, took a look, and said, you guys actually have to clear that away, and it cost 40 grand. So the fire marshal tells you got to do it, you got to do it, okay? So it was a very simple question, and it was a very simple answer, and I got my answer in 20 seconds. I was like, oh, okay, great, thank you. And that was it, okay? When they won't answer that, or they try to pull the Uno card on you, the take two card, we're not going to answer line item questions about the budget. Yeah, yes, you are. Yes, you are. This person even went so far, and God bless our client for this, before they retained us. They went to an open meeting and used forum time and were shut down at forum time. And that's when the next week they were in our office. Okay, so a lot of fun when they do that, because somebody's paying that piper, folks. We're not going to give up. We're going to get the answer to that question, even if we have to do it in a deposition and you're under oath and you have no choice but to answer, and you're being videotaped. Okay? So there's that one. And then another one, contracts are awarded without bids. We saw that in one of those examples we talked about in the last episode. These no bid contracts. Anytime there's a no bid contract, that is a red flag. Now, it could be innocent. You can have a board member say, hey, look, I know a great contractor. He's an expert in this area, and he's actually one of the lowest cost ones. And he might be. But they aren't supposed to do it that way. These are supposed to be bidded contracts. The whole reason for that is transparency and to make sure. You don't want people questioning whether or not what you're doing is wrong if what you're doing is in the best interest of the association. You don't want to have the look of impropriety. So you get 2 or 3 bids. Just get 2 or 3 bids. Have this guy's buddy come in and do a blind bid, just like those other 2 companies, and then take, if you want, the lowest bid, or maybe not the lowest, but the best one. That's it. It's what's supposed to happen. If you can show, hey, look, we got 3 bids. His was this. It's not the lowest, but we chose it, and that's okay. Part of the business judgment rule. They can choose among the bids they get. If they have a reason behind it, they can make that choice. That's their power. Okay? But when you've got these contracts awarded without bids, these no bid contracts, it is always a red flag. It doesn't mean it's always a conclusion that there's embezzlement, but it is always a red flag that requires a second look. And then upon a second look, you'll go one of 2 ways. Okay, they did this wrong. It shouldn't have done it this way, but actually it's a fair bid. Or this is a problem. Let's look even further. Okay? Always. Especially when the business goes to what we call an insider. If it's a director's company, a manager's other company, a manager or director's family member's company, or even a manager or director's best friend's company, because that's when I'm thinking kickback. Okay? So, we've already used this one forever. We've talked about this one several times. We have a client where a board member used his brother-in-law's contracting company to, I think it was security consulting, to evaluate their security cameras that they had at the front gate and back gates, and to make recommendations for any improvements that need to be made, upgrades in technology, upgrades in the level of service, or the quality of the technology, or even the number of cameras, whatever it was. $12,000 wasn't a huge amount for an HOA, right? $12,000, but no competitive bidding. So they awarded the contract. It turns out, first of all, they were replacing the cameras with cameras that were actually inferior to the cameras that were there. They replaced them with cameras that weren't as good. Okay? And they didn't need to be replaced. $12,000 contract. That's wrong. That is, and it turns out, and of course the minutes don't reflect all the machinations that went on, but we got it out eventually. Okay? And then the last one, and again, we hinted on this last time. Management companies with total control over the books, we're talking the finances, right? The books and records, including the checkbook. In other words, wrongful delegation by the treasurer, okay?
It's a no, yeah.
So without independent treasurer oversight, that is a recipe for disaster.
That's beyond bad optics.
If the checkbook is not with the treasurer, I would question that. If the treasurer can't tell you why this check was written immediately, why this check was written or why this check was written, they've delegated it illegally. You can't delegate that. You can't. You can have management advise you, consult with you, even write certain checks that have to be signed by the treasurer, but the treasurer needs to see them, to the vendors, to regular vendors, give them access. That's fine. That can happen, especially if you have a really big association. But you can't just give them the duties and walk away and they're handling it. And treasurer has no idea what checks were written because he doesn't sign the checks. Or she doesn't sign the checks or has no idea what check number they're on. I mean, that's just, you can't do it. You can't. But if you see that delegation of it all rests in this one person with no oversight by the very people that are fiduciary duty to oversee, that is a red flag. It's always wrong, but it doesn't always mean criminal conduct has occurred, but it's a red flag that it has. So those are the red flags to look out for. I think I nailed them all. I don't think I missed any.
That was good. No, that's pretty comprehensive.
Okay. Yeah. Now, any one of these, again, could be explainable on a second look. Okay? We started out by saying that. I'll say it again. They're red flags. That doesn't mean that they are conclusory. But when you start to pile on more than one of those, because typically on the wholesale fraud that occurs that we've seen in embezzlement, it's usually more than one. That's why some of these feel like they're repetitive or they overlap, because they do in real life. It's not just one. It's usually two or three of these. You have the invoice thing, and then you have also a lackadaisical board who's improperly delegated. So you've got the control thing. That's when you see it. So it's always going to include, not always, but almost always going to include more than one. So one alone could be totally innocent. But when you start to see more, they start to pile up, that is a even bigger red flag. That's when the red flag catches on fire. And now it's on fire red flag. Okay? That's when people need to start paying attention. Okay? So, what tools does California law already give you to help you become the person that catches what's going on and then comes to us, right? Who has figured it out? Because in every case we've given you, and the cases we explained that weren't our cases, Chula Vista and Ocean Towers in Santa Monica, were caught by vigilant homeowners who utilized one or more of these tools that we're going to share with you. I've already shared one of these in part one, but I'm going to go into detail here. And again, I have this covered in another podcast. Okay, when we talk about, go look for the podcast on the power of Civil Code Section 5200, because we're going to talk about that. That is your number one most powerful tool. It is number one, not only the most powerful tool, but the most useful tool in the right hands. And that is Civil Code 5200 giving you the right to almost every document that you can think of that relates to how your money is being spent. I say almost because there are some exclusions, but there aren't as many exclusions as there are inclusions, okay? If you haven't watched that 5200 video, I strongly suggest that as soon as you're done with this one, you go watch that one, okay? But for those who don't want to do that or who've already seen it, I'm going to give you a refresher, okay? Civil Code 5200, you have the legal right to inspect a whole host of documents. Give me some of them.
Financial records.
No. Tell me what that means.
Okay.
I want you to break it down item by item.
Okay.
Bank statements.
Bank statements, invoices, contracts.
Executed, written contracts. With who? Let's do one at a time.
Yeah.
Okay? Bank statements, self-explanatory. For every bank account that the HOA has, whether it's reserve, savings, or whatever else you want to call it. If it's with a bank and it's got an account number, I want all the bank statements for 3 years, let's say. Okay?
Just not the private accounts of the directors. But
well, what? Those aren't
right. Yeah.
Private accounts are not HOA bank records. That's Bob Smith's bank record. We're talking about corporate HOA bank records.
Tax filings, state and federal.
Well, hold on. You said in addition to bank statements, what about check registers?
Right, absolutely.
Okay. What about canceled checks?
Yes.
Okay. You said something about contracts. What does that mean? Contract with who?
Contracts with vendors. So any contracts reflecting vendors being engaged by the management.
Landscaping company. There's going to be a contract for everybody that gets paid regularly.
Roofing contractors, painters.
Right.
You name it.
Yeah. The Mr. Fix-It guy, the general whoever. If he's not a full-time employee of the HOA, he's going to have his own company, and he comes in when they call. He's going to have a contract. It's going to be something. Okay? Landscapers, they come regularly, multiple times a week, once a week, whatever it is. There's going to be a contract. How about a patrol company that looks at parking, towing, whatever? Yeah. There you go. How about if you have a manned gate, the security company, it's going to have a contract. Right. All of those. You have a right to see those. No redactions. Mm-hmm. You have a right to see everything in those contracts. They can't redact those contracts. They can't. How about the attorney-client fee agreement with the law firm hired by the HOA?
That's included as well.
It is. Right. Isn't that weird? Yeah. It's not
attorney-client.
It's not something I would have guessed at, because when you come and hire us at MBK Chapman, that our attorney-client fee agreement with you is privileged. It can never be disclosed unless you disclose it. It can't be disclosed. It is privileged, but not the HOA. Now, the bills and invoices, those are privileged. You're not going to get those, okay? So, yes, all those contracts, you can see them. Invoices from those same people, right? The title or the landscaper company is going to submit invoices monthly, weekly, bi-weekly, whatever it is. Every one of them for 3 years, let's say. I want to see them all, okay? The invoices for the security company, the invoices for a particular, you have a construction project being done and the person, was there for a month working, all the invoices for that contract to get paid to fix the stairway or any of the elevated elements. I want to see those invoices. I want to know what we paid them. I want to be able to compare the invoices to the canceled checks I had to see if they match. It's part of the investigation you or somebody you hire would do for you. But you have a right to see all those invoices, right? You have a right to see reimbursement requests. Again, match whether or not the checks match. And do those reimbursement requests seem awfully high? And if so, are there any other documentation to support them? If the number isn't enough to make you suspicious, well, I want to see some documentation. Minutes of open meetings. I want to see minutes where you guys approved this, okay? Legal bills, no. Redacted, if they want to, they can give you it redacted, okay? How about correspondence? Emails, letters, anything else that might be in writing between board and management company. I have a right to all of it. Unless it's part of board packet. It's considered executive session stuff.
Those are qualified, yeah.
And then they can redact it, and that's okay. There is permission or room for redaction in the 5200, but of course in 5215D, anything that's been redacted or withheld, they have to, if you ask for it, and I always ask for it in the ADR or in the 5200 demand, I ask up front just so I take care of it. I ask for, and if you're going to redact or withhold, please abide by 5215D and tell me what you're redacting or why you're withholding, okay? But that's okay. You're also going to get, you're entitled, by the way, not just to see these documents, you're entitled to copy these documents, okay? And what happens if your HOA screws around and misses the deadlines? There's 3 deadlines. I'm not going to go into detail. You can watch the other podcast for it. 5-day, 10-day, 30 days. What fits in what, you can see for yourself when you watch that other podcast. Or look at the article I've got on the website, mbkchapman.com. But what happens if you've got to force your HOA to comply because they're being dodgy? Remember we talked about red flags? Right. They don't want to they don't want to give documents. Right. What happens if they play that game?
For each of those items itemized in that 5200 request, you have a statutory fine of $500.
You're entitled to up to $500. That's right.
Up to $500.
Plus your attorney's fees and costs, and you're going to get them. Courts do not like it when boards of directors will not turn over documents that homeowners have an unequivocal right to. It makes them angry, okay? Which is great for you, the homeowner. This is why this is such a powerful tool. I can't stress that enough. I didn't even go through all the documents. I go through them all, at least the most common 20-something different types of documents you're entitled to. You also brought up tax and stuff like tax statements. I don't think that's as important for an investigation. That's why I left them out. But if you suspect financial abuse at your HOA, the first place to start is a 5200 demand for every financial document that you can think of that could possibly, even just a little bit, shed light on anything. If it turns out to be a wild goose chase, well, that's your loss. Big deal. But you get to see the documents, okay? If your HOA ever says you're not allowed to have these, the ones I just listed, that is pure unequivocal hogwash. It is a lie. It is, you unequivocally have a right to see them, and you don't have to have a reason for any of the ones I mentioned today. You do not have to have a good reason, nor do you have to share your reason. All it's necessary is give me and list. Okay? Now, if you listen to our other podcast, you've read my article, you'll see I give a bunch of tips on how to write the letter and specifically what to put next to each demand. So take a look because it'll just increase your chances and of getting the documents, and if not that, the speed at which the judge will award you sanctions and fees. Okay? 5200, super powerful. Next, you know what? I don't think we need to give any more. I think that's enough. I think that is enough.
Well, that's fantastic. 5200 is.
I think we can stop. I was going to give you one more tool, but I don't think we need to, and we're going to run out of time, and I've got more stuff to cover. So 5200 is your answer. Use it, okay? Now, let's talk about this culture of how does this foster? How does this happen? This culture of financial secrecy. The ideal world is homeowner asks a board member a question or asks for a document, and the board member says, absolutely. Let's put it this way. In an ideal situation where there's no nefarious conduct, everybody's on the up and up, everything's transparent, like it was with my HOA when I went and asked, why did we spend 40 grand on this? It was just a question. And the director's like, yeah, this guy over here opened his mouth and the fire marshal, we were doing, because they do a yearly inspection and the directors go with. Guy asked the question. It made the fire marshal look up and look. Actually, it's probably a good thing because I'm glad he might not have noticed it. And I'm glad he did notice it because if it was a problem, I want to find out before the fire. So maybe it was a good thing. But anyway, he's like, this guy said something that Marshall looked at it and goes, that's a good point. You guys need to clear that. And it ended up costing 40 grand, over the course of a year. It just did. So that was the answer. Totally perfectly good answer. Yeah. Okay. And by the way, it ended up being in the minutes. I didn't ask for him. He said, yeah, and we talked about it in the minutes. If you want, I'll send them to you. I'm like, no, I don't need them. Don't send. I get too many emails. Don't send them. But he offered. That's the ideal. That's the ideal. You ask a question, you ask for a document, and they say, here, done, over. Okay? But one of the things I don't understand is that even after decades of leading the charge in this area of the law, and I've been doing this a long time, folks. That's why I'm considered the expert that I am. Okay? I don't understand the dynamic between HOAs on the one hand, and I'm speaking about board members, okay, and homeowners ever being us against them. And that's what it is in, I would say, the vast majority of HOAs in California. It's us versus them. We, the board, have to circle the wagons around ourselves, even if they're not doing anything fraudulent. But the default is, why are you asking? Why do they want to know? What is their angle? And the default over here is, I'm going to look at everything that they tell me with the worst possible
lens.
What
are they hiding?
What are they hiding? I don't get it. When did the dynamic become us versus them? It's supposed to be all us. The whole point of the law, Davis-Stirling Act, finally catching up with this, by the way, because it wasn't like this forever. It finally caught up a few years ago. The whole point of you can't be on the board of directors unless you're a member, right? The whole point of that is it should be us. You're the president of the board. I'm a regular member at large. You own a home in here. I own a home in here. We're supposed to be on the same side. I don't get it. I understand it. I understand what leads to that. We're going to talk about that in a second. I just don't get it. That's the thing I'm talking about. Okay? Human nature being what it is, and the human animal being what it is, and it's in many ways a contemptible beast, you have ego. You have people who have no power or authority in their life, and this gives them tremendous power and authority over other people. You look at the abuse from that video. It was one of the ones you didn't guest in this one. I had Karash share it. I know you saw it.
The authoritarian.
The director from hell. Yeah. One of my earlier episodes where we caught on camera, which never happens. We actually had on camera in real time a director being a hellish demon of a director. And it was actually really entertaining. But that person, quintessential, a loser. No authority or power in his real life, but boy, did he have that in the HOA realm, and he exercised it like an authoritarian because it made him feel good about himself. Maybe he was beaten as a kid. Probably deserved it. I don't know. But there it is, okay? So I can understand why it's happening. I just don't get it. But regardless, it's us versus them in many respects. And when you're trying to catch instances of theft, that just makes it harder to do. Okay? So what has to happen is this culture does need to change somewhat. If we're going to see less of these, the culture needs to change. There needs to be, for one, pushback by homeowners for these open book policies. And the way you push back is more homeowners ought to do 5,200 demands once in a while and ask for documents just to see. Nothing major, just to see. If HOA started getting these a lot more, they'd be a lot less willing to play games if the court slapped them down a few times. Once might not be enough unless you hired us and we came and, if you have 20 demands at $500 a piece, that's what? 10 grand in just penalties plus another 20 or 10 in attorney's fees or 20 in whatever it was. And suddenly you're looking at some real money. And that happens once or twice. The HOA is going to get smart. But if you had more homeowners just doing this all the time, it would educate boards a lot more quickly, especially boards that have nothing to hide. Remember, I'm not talking about the fraudulent ones necessarily that are going to hide because they don't have a choice. Because as soon as they release these documents, the cat's out of the bag, right? So what are they going to do? They have to circle the wagons. They don't have a choice. I'm talking about HOAs that have this us versus them mentality, and there isn't a reason for it because the HOA isn't technically doing anything that wrong, but they still play the game. That's who I'm talking about here. The more homeowners engage with their rights, the more used to honoring those rights the board's going to get, and you're going to have less of a problem. And the more open the culture is about, here, look at this. You want to see their invoices? Here. You want to see that? Here. All you got to do is pay them their costs, all right? Their copy costs, stuff like that's fair. You pay their costs unless they're digital, and then it should be free, and there you go. Okay? How about third-party audits? What do you think about demanding third-party audits?
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think that's getting a neutral third party to take a look, gander.
Not the normal accountant that might be friends with somebody on the board,
Exactly.
but a third party that's selected by maybe a group of homeowners or something, right?
That should really be not non-controversial.
Why would it be? Yeah. And I mean a formal audit. I mean a audit done under accounting
Principles. Yeah.
principles. Okay, not a we looked at the numbers and it looks kosher to us.
Right.
No, I want an actual
Standards that comport with the California Board of Accountants, guidelines.
right. Okay, so that's what I mean by an audit, but a third-party audit of HOA's books once in a while, not all the time, once every couple of years. Okay, I would like to limit board authority to sign contracts over X amount of dollars without member approval. So you come up with a figure, depending on the size of your HOA would determine the size of that contract. But, if it's a small HOA, maybe it's a few thousand. If it's a large HOA, maybe a few $100,000. But whatever it is, large contracts over a certain threshold maybe should require a vote.
To your point, if you have that threshold with the 5% on special assessments, why not have it to what you're suggesting?
Yeah, maybe.
Similar standard.
Yeah. But of contracts over a certain amount, you don't want to put up an election because elections are expensive. You don't want to throw it up for election for them to write a contract to to a new security company or a new landscaping company. But if they're going to hire a contractor to do all the balconies and that's $12 million contract, maybe that needs to go through the membership. Okay. So maybe you limit board authority to enter into a contract with any vendor over a certain amount of money, and whatever that is can be discussed, okay? Reason being that people now are going to take a closer look, and they might start asking, like, okay, does anybody on the board know this person, or is this a family member? Were there bids? Show us the bids. It gets you involved, okay? Another one, insist that your HOA manager rebid every year. Rebid meaning you throw it out to multiple management companies. I'm not going to name any because I don't want to give anybody a free commercial here. But there are, 7 to 10 really big management companies that are all over the place. And then there are dozens of smaller ones. Let's say you're with Acme Management. Made up name again. Okay, Acme Management. Acme Management might be wonderful. You might love them. They're great. But they should rebid every year so that you're looking at BDE Management and ABC Management too. Okay? They should rebid every year. There should be no sweetheart deals anymore. Okay? Especially given the amount of authority, trust, and control that a lot of management companies apparently exercise. Okay? And then, this is maybe pie in the sky, but I think HOA members need to be more careful about electing directors that treat oversight like an attack on them personally. We see this all the time when we send out, when our clients have attempted to send a 5200 demand on their own and not done a great job, let's say, or have asked unofficially for copies of documents. And you have directors act like they've accused them of a crime.
You have to have the right temperament to serve.
Right. Like, why is this personal? The statute gives me the right to ask for it. I want to ask for it because a second or third or 10th set of eyes could never hurt. Why are you bothered by that? But they are. So often you see these directors become personally offended, that you are challenging my ethics by asking for that. You shouldn't be serving. If that's who you are, go away. Don't serve because you don't belong.
Which is why elections and recalls are so important.
So important. Which is why I'm still flabbergasted that a lot of HOAs struggle to get quorums for director elections. Like, what? Dude, mail it in. It takes 5 minutes. And lick your envelope. You know, it comes pre-stamped. Right. So.
Well, I'm not to get philosophical, but oftentimes the disengaged get disenfranchised, disenchanted, or
they're busy. I have a life. Yeah. I do this. I work hard all day. I come home. I coach my kids thing, and then I have to tutor my kid and make sure they're bathed and eaten and make dinner. And I don't have time to do that. Yes, you do. Take 5 minutes to vote. It takes 5 minutes. The envelopes or under the new law that just passed, the electronic voting law. If your HOA is one of those, vote online. Done. Easy. Even easier. No licking. You know.
Doesn't need a proxy.
Yeah, well, you can't. Unless they're another member of the HOA. You can designate a neighbor to be a proxy, but you can't. Yeah. Okay. So let me close this out, this 2-part episode out, okay? Embezzlement is very serious. Unfortunately, it isn't rare in our HOAs in California, okay? It's not always newsworthy. It's not always millions of dollars. Sometimes it's just a few thousand. Sometimes it's a few hundred. Sometimes it's a few 100,000. But it's always a big deal. Okay, always a big deal. And unfortunately, most homeowners never know about it. And the ones that do, you find they figured it out because somebody took a second look at what was going on. Okay, they went with their gut. Something sparked their interest. Something went off. Some alarm bell went off. Okay, we talked a lot about the red flags to look for. I gave you 5. Look for those. If you use the tools the Davis-Stirling Act gives you, and we're talking about the 5200 document demand, you'll have all the information you need to figure things out. And if you're not good with numbers or financial documents, hand them over to somebody that you trust. Okay? But be vigilant. This is your money. This is your HOA, and ultimately it's your investment, your house, your property. So take care of it. This has been HOA Hell. If you like this episode, please hit the like button. And if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe to our channel. Again, HOA Hell. If you want to leave a comment, we always love to hear from our listeners. And until next time, have a wonderful